Hi, I'm Seb, and this week I'll be making a giant turtle mount. Earlier this week, while deciding what to make, I was looking through some of my earlier kit bash pieces from when I first jumped back onto the hobby of Dungeons and Dragons, and I came across this guy. He's a little turtle from a Yowie, which is kind of like a Kinder Surprise, but an Australian native mythical creature. The little turtle came in the pack, and I decided back then with a bit of foam and some popsicle sticks to make this little portable shop that would pop up at random times through my campaign. So as I've been doing a lot of Feywild builds lately, I decided to rebuild my traveling turtle salesman, but with a much more fantastical Feywild feel. So I jumped on a Thingiverse and downloaded myself a turtle model. You don't need to download and print these models. You could get something from a dollar store or realistically any kind of creature. I'd love to see this same build done, but using different kinds of beasts of burden. Or really, absolutely anything. Why not? It's a magical world. So now I have my turtle printed and primed, it's time to get started on my vision for Turtle 2.0. So to start off, I mixed up some homemade sculptor mold. This is basically some ground up toilet paper, a little bit of plaster, some grout mixers, and then I throw in the water and some Mod Podge and PVA glue to mix it up. I almost always mix the wrong amount and have to add some more in till you get a nice consistency. Once it gets to the right consistency, you can just take it out and start sticking it to the turtle shell. I decided fairly early on that I want the whole thing to be completely overgrown. So maybe the new shopkeeper is a druid that likes his portable place of business to bring the beautiful lush gardens wherever he goes. So with this in mind, as I started to build up the sculptor mold, I was adding in some small roots that I've collected from my garden. Once this was all dry, I gave the sides of the turtle a quick zenithal highlight with a wraithbone white before coming in and staining all of the sculptor mold with a watered down brown acrylic paint. This soaks in nicely to give us that dirty, muddy base that we're going for. So far this is looking good and is going to be a nice base for the plants and structures to come. After giving the turtle a quick base with a contrast green and some browns over his shell, I jumped online and printed off a few wooden platforms. You could build these out of stir sticks or popsicle sticks, but to be honest, I just didn't have the time this week and I've got the option to print them. So I used my cheat machine and got these going. Once they were primed and painted with a layer of wraithbone white, I started to play around with the positioning before busting out the super glue and sticking them in place. For the second level, I needed a few bits and pieces of wood to act as supports. So I chopped up a couple of toothpicks and some other scraps to help build some supports and really make this thing look Mod Podge and thrown together. And also adding in a little ladder. Then adding a few more supports to hold everything in place. Once the basic supports were in, I started to use some more of those roots from earlier to add in some more natural looking supports, as well as a bit of overgrowth and maybe some live trees that are even growing out of this earth. As these roots are from nature, they can be quite brittle and fall apart on your build. I give them all a few coats in a watered down Mod Podge, allowing this to dry. As long as you use the matte Mod Podge, these are going to look fine and be a lot more solid when you're done. I then continue to add a heap more of these roots, and at this point I decide to paint in the eyes. All the wooden platforms got a combination of Gore-Grunter fur and Cygor brown from the contrast range from Citadel Paints, going with a bit of a wet blend to help give a bit of natural variation to all of these wooden textures. Next up, I grabbed the Tamiya Soil Effects. This gives a nice textured matte finish, so all the dirt areas got a nice coat with this, trying to get it in, up and underneath all of the structure, not being too concerned if it gets onto the structure itself, as building your structure out of dirt is bound to be messy. At this point, I decided to add another platform to the front, like a little driver's stand where they can look out at where they're going. So this needed a few supports, roots, and a ladder of its own. After adding the last few supports, I went over all of the wooden structures with a dry brush in Tau Light Ochre. Then busting out the Cygor Brown for a nail polish, before using it to darken up a few details on the turtle shell and grabbing a green shade for the turtle skin. And now for the fun part, adding the life. We start by adding a little bit of glue and then using the static grass applicator to put the first layer of grass down. Once this is done, we repeat the process with a couple of different foam flocks and then again with another static grass, but a slightly longer and darker type to add some more natural variation to this growth. Now at this point, I'm pretty happy with how this guy looks. He's transformed from a weird grey-white blob into something quite magical. Now, like many in my generation, I am obsessed with plants. So when I found these Monstera plant models on my mini factory, I knew that with a quick contrast paint and clipping off the bases, they would be perfect for this build. So I did exactly that and got to gluing these hipster plants all over our beautiful beast of burden. Along with all kinds of other flowers, grass tufts, and plants that I've got in my collection. Adding these dark plants into the shaded areas under the structures, and these nice bright pieces growing out in the light. Now for an extra layer of fun, adding in the tiny stuff. All of this stuff is available for free on Thingiverse. You just need a resin printer to get this level of detail. It's something I would actually highly recommend in the hobby. They're worth every penny. Print it off on my resin printer, then I give them all a basic paint job with contrast paints. Some more detailed than others. Before gluing them down wherever I feel like they belong to help tell the story. Painting a little bit of extra spilled wax around these melted candles can really help sell the effect. Then adding a few tiny little friends for our druid. With one of these broken vases, I decided to make a little bit of spilled inventory, using some of these crystal shards that I've picked up in my days of crafting. Pulling out a bright green Citadel paint, I added some highlights into the turtle skin before calling him done. And here we have our final finished product. This guy turned out absolutely stunning. The tiny little details really helped to tell a story, and I think he is a massive upgrade from the old build that I did 2 or 3 years ago. It was a lot of fun taking an old concept of something I made when I was fairly early on in the hobby and rebuilding it using the tools and a lot of the skills that I've picked up in the last few years. I absolutely loved the process of this build. Having the freedom to just create anything that I wanted, not being held down by a reference or source material, was a lot of fun. This was something I essentially dreamt up and then brought to life, which is my favorite part of any of these kinds of hobbies. The idea that something was just a thought in my mind and is now a physical object that other people can interact with and enjoy. It's incredible. It's something that I often struggle to put into words, but it's why I love this community and this craft. If you keep doing this stuff over and over, you'll get a lot better at it. There's nothing special about me or what I can do. I just do it. Remember guys, never stop making stuff.